All right. Hello, fabulous people of the world. I am here with Kay Crow, and I'm Natalie Elliott, and today we're just going to take time out and talk about what to look for in a good clinical sex therapy supervisor with that. I know over the last couple of years, I've been hearing some horror stories, and I want to do what I can do to correct that. I want to make sure people have good information. And so Kay was so kind to join me in this endeavor and helping get this information out to more people. So, Kay, if you would introduce yourself, how long you've been doing sex therapy supervision, how long you've been a member of AASECT, what do you love about the work you're currently doing? Because I know you're doing more speaking and talking and supervising, speaking and writing.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, welcome and yeah, let's go.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie. So I had a private practice
Mhm.
for 30 years in San Antonio
Wow.
and closed it uh, in January of 2020, just before
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm.
How prescient is that? And so now I'm focusing on
Mm-hmm.
supervision,
Okay.
specifically sex supervision,
Mm-hmm.
uh, teaching and writing.
Oh,
Um, AASECT really doesn't have a formal process for finding a supervisor. So I
yeah.
love this idea that you
Mm-hmm.
had to let's put out content and
Mm-hmm.
let's help people find the right person for supervision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. And I'd like to say, um, I, I don't know I mean, I've had the idea of like I want to do more like putting out content. And so, but you and I got together because we shared a supervisee with that. And I don't
Right.
even want to call her a supervisee because she's just so fabulous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we said a consultee with
Mhm.
that.
Yes.
And I think we both really enjoyed the process and
Yes.
with that. And so we want to make sure that other people are having good experiences and enjoying the process as well. And so I think I've been very blessed to enjoy all of my supervisors and
Oh,
my supervisees. Yeah, so this is great. So
mhm.
I am, let's see, I have a private practice in Atlanta. I've been in private practice for over 10 years, been doing the work over 15. I love it. I'm probably half supervision, half clients at this point in time, and just loving it. So, and wanting to do even more sex therapy supervision because I just have such a great time. I feel like I'm dealing with like kind of the cream of the crop of the field. It's one thing to be a therapist, but then when you decide to do a certification that they want you to take at least 18 months. Like this is not a one weekend, you get a piece of paper and you're certified. This isn't even to get it done in 6 months. Like this is a commitment of time. And so
It is.
you're dealing with, to me, I've always felt like I was dealing with people who were like wanting to be the best of the best, wanting
Yes.
to go the extra step, wanting to say, like, I am certified and I jumped through all of these hoops to be able to really stand as a professional. So,
Right.
yeah, and even though um I think the ASEC process can feel a little long sometimes, and hopefully a good supervisor will really break that down to you for it so it feels a little bit simple. When you get finished, there is this feeling of accomplishment and security that you sit as a professional of like,
Yeah.
I know that I know what I know with that.
Hmm.
And so I just love supervisees who sign up for that, in a world where they're like,
Yes.
let's do it fast. Everybody can do anything. Like just do it. To have professionals say, I want to be certified. I want to
Mhm.
jump through those hoops. I want to know that when a client sits in front of me, they're getting quality care. So, all right.
Yes.
What would you like to add? And then and if you want to go ahead and start jumping into the tips, please do.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When I finished my certification as a sex therapist, it was 2004. I've been a member of AASECT since 1999, and I became a
Mm,
supervisor in 2015.
mm-hmm.
Um, but when I finished my certification, I really felt like I finally had a holistic perspective for working with people.
Oh.
It seemed to me, and I did a lot of my, graduate school training in Texas, very
Mm-hmm.
conservative part of the country, and there was nothing about sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
But I was dealing with it from the time I got licensed.
Yeah.
And that's what appealed to me about certification. I was filling in the gaps in my
Mm-hmm.
training.
Mm-hmm.
And across the United States, that's typically the case. Few
Yeah.
people get good training in
Yeah.
sexuality, sexual health, and sex
Mm-hmm.
therapy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And,
um,
in some ways, I'm a little jealous of the supervisees of today because they have these complete programs where they can go and finish. And so, when I was doing my training, and I'd started initially training in '08, everything was piecemeal. So it was like, oh, a CEU is coming to town about premature ejaculation. Got to catch that. Oh, a
yeah,
CEU is coming to town about this. And so it's very, very kind of a piecemeal. I really felt like like I was on the hunt. Like it's around Easter time, so it was almost kind of like hunting for sex therapy credit eggs to
yes,
to
that's
get
true.
certified. Yeah,
I did the same thing. And because there was nothing offered where I lived at the
right.
time, it was traveling, it was
Yeah,
AASECT conferences
yeah,
and piecing it together. It took me 5 years to
yeah.
finish
It took me
certification.
4. Mm-hmm. With that. So,
Because there was
and it was
nothing.
so funny because even at around about the 4-year mark, because another professional had to say, Natalie, I think you might be done, and I was like, no, I'm not. Have you seen like it's 1,000 things? They're like, no, because I'm done, and you've been in a lot of training. Because that's the other thing, right? After you go to about 5 trainings, you start seeing the same people over and over and over again.
Yes.
And so we kind of created this community. Like, will you be at the next one? Of course. It wasn't that many being offered with that.
Right.
So, okay. So I want to jump into the tips. Okay. So,
Yeah.
what for you, get the number one tip you would want a supervisee to know about finding a supervisor?
Well, I think starting with it's a collaborative process.
Yeah.
If you're, this is we're so fortunate to be part of a field where
Hmm.
you have the opportunity to learn from others who've
Hmm.
had vast experience. And so
Yeah.
I always tell my supervisees, this is a collaboration. I don't
Yeah.
look at it as a hierarchy.
Right.
I'm not reinventing supervisees in my image because I want
Correct.
them to be who they are.
Yeah.
And um, I'm just helping them incorporate sex therapy skills into what they already do.
Hmm.
And so I always start with this is a collaboration.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And I know specifically one of the lines that I use around that is you're the one that's in the room with the client. Like
Right.
you're there, you're in the room. And so I'm just on the outside, hopefully giving you some good resources so that you're better in the room, but you're the one that's in the room. So that was so number one, collaboration. The relationship should be collaborative. Okay, I'm gonna add that my number two tip for finding a good supervisor is making sure they can meet with you consistently with that.
Okay.
And so if the 50 hours of supervision can take forever if there's not some sort of plan to keep it consistent with that. Getting two therapists on the same page at the same time, like in the same location on the same Zoom call, usually takes a while. And and it can make your process even longer if there's not some type of plan to keep it consistent. And so please, when you're looking for a supervisor, talk to them about like what's the plan that like how often do I need to be meeting? How often can I meet with you? Does your schedule allow enough time for me to meet with you consistently every 2 weeks, once a month, or however you guys decide to do that? But I've seen people just kind of get lost in the process because of scheduling with that, and you kind of
Right.
just fall off, or
Right.
and most therapists are busy and juggling multiple things, and so when one thing falls off the plate, it may take us 2 years to get back around to pick it back up on the plate to finish the process. And so I want to make sure that you find a supervisor that you can meet with consistently and you guys put some type of plan in place for consistency. So yeah.
Yeah, and what I typically do is tell a
Mm-hmm.
supervisee if we can pick, if they're going to join one of my groups, that's
Mm-hmm.
easy. But
Yeah.
if they're one individually, if they can pick the same day and time each
Mm-hmm.
month,
Yeah.
then I put it on the calendar and schedule
Yep.
around that. That
Mm-hmm.
kind of,
Yep.
and
That
supervisees can accumulate 4 hours every month of supervision.
yeah.
So that's just one of the regulations.
Yeah.
My next one is choosing a supervisor who can be present and engaged with you, is not on the Zoom call
Mm,
or on their phone.
right.
Half
Yeah.
I have so many stories from supervisees that, yeah, so and so, I just really didn't feel like they were there, and they're like, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
Right.
So, because like you said, the supervisee is the person in the room with the client, and
Mm-hmm.
I've really got to listen closely
Mm-hmm.
to follow what's happening with that client,
Yeah.
and make suggestions
Yeah.
that supervisee can then apply or not, depending upon
Right.
the room.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that's really good. Okay. So then my next one would be very practical.
yeah,
Is to get receipts. Okay. And
yes.
so, heaven forbid something happened to your supervisor, but if they do, I want you to have some type of paperwork trail so
Mhm.
that so that if they fall off the face of the earth, which I have had happen to a supervisee, and then they had to switch with me. And let me say the AASECT board went over and above and beyond to work with that supervisee. But it's going to be a
Mhm.
lot easier if you have a paper trail. And the best paper
Yes.
trail is receipts. I have paid for this many hours. I hear the receipts to prove it. And so you do want to make sure that you're getting some type of proof. Um, being it A lot of supervision is done online. All my supervision is done online these days. And so we don't have that ability to like sign off on notes anymore. But I don't know if I ever did that with my sex therapy supervisees. Most of them were fully licensed. But there has to be something that you have record. So if your supervisor falls off the face of the earth, you can take to the board to say, I've had this many hours of supervision because I need them to count. We want them to count. We don't want you working on something for 2 years, and then some unfortunate accident happens that throws you off with that. So very,
Right.
very practical, but very, very important.
Yeah,
So,
I love that. And what I tell my supervisees, and I've made an arrangement with another AASECT certified
hmm
um, sex
yeah,
therapist,
yeah,
that if something happens to me,
yep,
my supervision records will go to her.
yeah,
I keep them all up to date. And
hmm
so she can then handle that process with the
hmm
supervisee.
yep,
Um, so they're not left hanging, because
hmm
that's a horrible feeling. I understand.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, my next one is taking into account the supervisee's learning style.
Oh,
Some
good
people
one.
are more visual, some
hmm
people are more auditory,
hmm
some people need hands-on, they need to try something to really,
Yep.
they really need to use sensate focus before they really understand how
Yeah.
it works, for example. So I always ask them, usually in our first meeting, okay, what's your learning style? How do you learn best? I remember I was
hmm
using kind of a Socratic method with this one supervisee, and it just didn't work for her. She was like, just tell me what to do, because I'm asking questions trying to get her to
Right. Yeah.
for her. So that's kind of where tapping into their learning style came from. Yeah.
hmm Okay, great. I think my next one, and I don't think I wrote this down, but I want to add it, is making sure you have, and actually, I think this goes back to your point of collaboration, but I'm going to name it something different. I'm going to call it feedback. So making
Okay.
sure that you can take feedback from your supervisor. So you want a supervisor who can give you feedback in a way in which you can take it. And then also
Mhm.
making sure your supervisor can take feedback from you. And so if you as a supervisor need to say, hey, this process isn't working for me. I don't seem to be able to get it. Like I need you to be more directive with me, or I need you to be less directive with me. We want a supervisor to be able to say, okay, thank you for giving me that feedback so I can be a better supervisor for you. Because I would hope that we all want the process to be the best it can be. I know as a supervisor, I want to put out clinicians that are really, really good with that. And so if we can make the supervision process better for you to learn, then I think that's just going to be brilliant. So feedback is what I'm going to call that step. And I don't even know what number we're on. But I'm going to say feedback is the next one. Okay, go ahead, Kay.
And my next one is transparency.
Ooh.
I really think that, especially with sex therapy, part of learning sex therapy is evaluating your own biases towards different aspects of
Mm,
sex therapy.
yes.
And some people know that coming into the field, and some
Yeah.
people don't,
Yeah.
and that's the focus of the start, to look at, okay, what can I be objective about and what can I not?
Right.
For example, I chose not to work with bestiality because I'm an animal lover, and I really don't think
Yeah.
animals can give their consent for
Gotcha.
sex, and consent is
Yeah.
important to me.
Yeah.
So I chose not to work with that because I really can't be objective about it.
Yeah.
But it takes transparency
Yeah.
process, I think.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So my next one is going to be another really grounded one, but it comes up when you said transparency is making sure there is a supervision contract in place because that helps with that transparency. It helps with
Oh,
the process of you knowing what's expected of you and what you should be expecting from your supervisor. And so it's written down in black and white, and you have a good understanding like, what are they going to be assessing me on? Like, what are they looking for? What skills do they need? And all of that is in the contract. Who's the backup supervisor? So, like, hey, you were saying you have a backup supervisor. I know I have a backup supervisor as well. That should be in the contracting because if something happens, like, you may not remember what was verbally said, but if it's in the contract of this is who I call in case of emergency, this is how we terminate with that if we needed to terminate, like with that. If all of that is written in the contract, it's going to set you up for success with that. And I think that goes kind of hand in hand with transparency with that. So, yeah. Okay. All right, Kay.
and I the next point that choosing a supervisor, from my perspective, is you need someone who can meet you where you are.
Mm,
Um, because people are just coming into this field, maybe they're not
yeah.
licensed yet,
Yeah.
and you're more. Whereas I've also had people who are extremely experienced, yet they're experienced maybe in working with BDSM or kink, but they
Mm-hmm.
haven't worked with sexual dysfunction or done
Mm-hmm.
much work with couples.
Yeah.
I see it as my role to kind of balance out their exposure to different
Yeah.
types of cases,
Mm.
so that they have a well-rounded exposure by the time they send in their application.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. Thank you. Um, I, on that, I would also want a supervisor to help you with your application.
Yes.
And you can have multiple supervisors up until six. I think it's right, Kay. You can have, up to six supervisors. So make sure you have a primary one, and if they're willing and will have the time to help you with the AASECT application, it is better, I think, especially because we have people going through these programs than it used to be. But it can be a little bit daunting to pull everything together. So I'm gonna say that was a little that was a little side note.
Yes.
My last one is going to be to make sure that you're working with a supervisor that's doing something around making sure that their own growth is continuing. And so,
Uh-huh.
and you can just simply have a conversation with them about that. Like, what continuing education are you doing? Most of us required. And so we do get the continuing education. Um, but I do know of some therapists who it feels like they haven't changed or grown or learned anything in years.
Mhm.
It's kind of like they came in the field, learned what they needed to learn, went into private practice, and really they haven't, I think, taken the time. And with sex therapy, it can be like we need to look for the next CEU that's going to grow us, right? And
Yes.
so I would want you to have a supervisor who's doing some active growth with that. Because this is a field where we can keep learning and growing and learning and growing and learning and growing. And Kay, you could probably attest to this. The language of our field and the words seem to change. For me, I feel like every 5 years, like if I'm not in a like you wait, what? We're what kind of sexual with
Yeah.
that.
Exactly.
And so you want a supervisor who's like aware of those new words, like who
Mhm.
understands the current language, because that's what your clients are going to come in using. That's what probably you may be learning in your program, and so you want a supervisor who can essentially keep up. They
Mhm.
didn't just rest on their laurels because this field changes. Like it it changes with that.
Changes a lot, a
Yeah.
lot. Um, well, the last point I have is to remind people that they can work with up to 6 supervisors. I
Yeah.
always like to tell
Hmm.
potential supervisees that AASECT is such an amazing voice. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
it's such an amazing choir of voices that you want to hear as many as possible. And
Yeah.
so, you can do 10 hours with this person, 10 hours with that person.
Hmm.
And maybe you're interested in sex education. You can
Hmm.
work with up to 5 hours of a sex education supervisor or
Hmm.
a sex counseling
Hmm.
supervisor. So keep that in mind. Give yourself
Yeah.
a variety of experience and exposure when it comes to supervision. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to just be one person.
I actually did not know that. It has never crossed my mind to go
Okay.
to do a couple of hours with a sex therapy educator or sex therapy counselor, but I can see how that would be so valuable, especially because as a
Especially for
therapist,
finding
yeah. I remember one of my supervisors, he told me good sex therapy is good sex education. And so that makes so
Yep.
much sense to go spend some time with the sex educator. Like, I should do that. I think I've given 5 already, but I think another tip is going to be having a supervisor. I don't know if we've said this, um, that feels supportive to you, that feels
Yes.
supportive. When you have, I almost feel like, I mean, you're taking on, we want the certification to take at least 18 months.
Right.
Um, and you're moving pretty fast if you're making it in 18 months.
Yeah.
For me, it took 4 years. One of my colleagues, it took 10 years. And so you want somebody who's going to cheer you along the way. You want
Sure.
somebody who's going to be like, you can do this. Let's get creative about how you're going to get that SAR in. You want to feel supported with that. Um, and I think that's all my 5 tips. Did you list all of yours, Kay?
Yes, that's all of mine. We got through
Okay.
it. Okay,
So
so
altogether, hopefully we've given you at least 10 tips for
mhm.
finding a good sex therapy supervisor. So, Kay, would you give them your information so if they want to reach out to you for supervision, they can?
Sure, sure. So K Crow website Azure Pearl, AZUREPEARL.net.
Okay.
Yeah, you can reach me through my website.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask one more thing. Kay, what time zone you're on? Are you in?
I'm in the Mountain Standard Time Zone.
Okay. All right. And I'm Natalie Elliott. You can find my information at natalieelliott.com. Elliott has 2 L's and 2 T's with that. And I am in the Eastern time zone. And I just say that because I've had supervisors in different time zones and it has made supervision be a little complicated. Um, because I remember one time I was a supervisee and I just couldn't get it right. I just couldn't. And so it's helpful when they're in the same time zone. But do what you need to do to get the training and support you need to get. And if you have questions, I know I'm always open to ask questions. So send me an email. All of this information you can find on my website. Kay, I'm sure you're open to them sending you an email and getting information. And so we are here to support you in the process. In the first AASECT conference I went to, they said to me, it was I think it was Ginger Bush, and she was like, Natalie, we want you here. We need you here. And I have tried my best to echo that to other therapists as they're coming up. We want you here. We need you here. I don't think we still have a sex therapist in every state yet. Kay, do you know? I feel like we don't in every state.
I think they're relatively new in like North and South Dakota.
Okay, with that. Okay, so we
Yeah.
might have one per state now.
So
I can tell you that's not enough. You know,
it's not.
is not enough. The sex therapists I know who are actually like advertising as sex therapists, they're booked, you know. Especially a lot of us got booked over the pandemic, you know, because I remember calling a colleague during the pandemic and saying, hey, I need you to take this client. I'm seeing the couple. And he was like, no, I can't, Natalie, with that. And so that's a testament that we need you in this field. So don't ever doubt that there's enough business for everybody. There's more than enough business for sex therapists with that. So, all right, Kay, I'll leave it to you. Any final thoughts before we jump off?
Well, I just wanted to tell potential supervisees that, kind of along the lines of what you were talking about, the title of sex therapist is unregulated in every state except for Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
so
true.
anybody can shingle and call themselves a sex therapist.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, AASECT is the gold standard of training and
Yeah.
certification.
Yeah.
And so it is worth it
Mm-hmm.
because we live in a conservative country.
Mm-hmm.
And I know when I decided to get certified, I wanted an organization like AASECT behind me
Mm-hmm.
in case something happened,
Yeah.
in case I felt like what I was doing was
Mm-hmm.
inappropriate or immoral or
Yep.
whatever. So that's part of the benefit of certification, is that you have the support and validation
Yeah.
of this credential.
Definitely so. Definitely so. Um, and I've had it both, Kay. I've had clients and I've had supervisees that when they work with me, they see the difference like
Mhm.
immediately. Like first phone call, there's a difference in the quality of questions, in just the feel of the call. Like there's a difference when you're working with somebody quality with that. So okay, there's more things to say, but we want to keep this small and usable for you so that you can get the information, and hopefully make some good decisions. So thank you so much for tuning in, however you guys are getting this information, and we're here for you. So feel free to reach out.